Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming new moon in the sign of Gemini, taking place on the 27th of May 2025. This new moon takes place at 6 degrees and 5 minutes of the sign of Gemini. And to be honest with you, from this late spring, early summer's energies, at least on my hemisphere, this is one of the more positive, one of the more really, really helpful ones in so very many different ways. So let's get into it straight away. And let me just show you on the screen. So this is the conjunction of the sun and moon in the sign of Gemini. A new moon is always the conjunction, the meeting of the sun and moon. That is when we do not see the moon because it is dark. It is totally dark. And hence, a new moon is a very powerful creational energy. Its symbolism is always associated with, for example, seed of intention, or in Gemini, especially, a thought, something that wishes to create itself, or a creative force. However, a new moon is also always, regardless in which sign or in which context, due to its darkness, it is also good to eliminate immediately, quickly, like a sudden decision or like a sudden energy burst, a sudden emotional outburst. Why not? That certain things in our lives we wish to disown. So a new moon is also useful in that sense because we do throw symbolically that which we want to disown into the darkness of the new moon to be, swallowed by the forgetfulness of the abyss, to be forgotten, to be annihilated in thought, in intent. But of course, neither expression of the new moon excludes the other one. So, long story short, any new moon is a really, really good time to use it constructively in the ways that I mentioned earlier, either to eliminate energies, start eliminating, because of course the new moon is not, usually it's not instant. It will take a few weeks, months, maximum of 6 months, but usually it happens in every person's own timing, if you know what I mean. So you know your own timing, your even your own biological clock, so to speak, because that is also very relevant and very um how should I say, worthy to be taken into consideration when we have questions of timing. When is likely this and that to take place? Well, the astrological clock is one, which shows us the roughly the period when we can expect it. These, for example, for the big planets, these months, for personal planets, these weeks. But within that, it is actually our biological clock, our personal clock, that will determine more precisely when. So that's why it is really, really important. And Gemini, in so very many ways, also expresses the need to know the self. Because the symbolism of the twin, well, in any twin, there is two elements. And even though they are almost like mirror images of one another, very, very similar, sometimes, in non-living beings, almost the same or totally the same. However, within that unity, within that mirror match, still the individual component needs to know itself, and knowing thyself in this sense automatically means knowing your twin, knowing the other, knowing the mirror. And this applies not just in a practical way, in a down to earth way, but also in a higher philosophical way, where the other many times it's something as uh large as the whole world, because sometimes the relationship is between us and the world, and in that sense the world can be your twin, a mirror, because things about ourselves are mirrored by reality in more than one way. Some are very, very personal, close mirrors, small things in life, or very intimate things in life that are, of course, closed in your own personal sphere. But sometimes it is as large as the whole world. Like, let me give you the best example: presidential elections. A whole country is the other in that sense. Okay, this is also Libra, because a relationship, but it's also Gemini, especially if that relationship is something as close as a brother sister, or something very, very close and important to us, that, like, for example, a neighbor. That's very much Gemini energy. Gemini rules neighbors, because you're gonna live there. And okay, let's not necessarily think of modern times. Let's go back maybe just 100 years or more in the past, where you couldn't just relocate so quickly, easily, efficiently. Usually, when you got somewhere, you knew you would stay for a larger number of years, usually. Okay, it wasn't everyone's norm, but it was most people's norm, regardless of the culture or, place, because that's how human civilization was. So neighbors were very, very important. And, especially in American culture, we can see so many Western movies and books and, all of that, where bad neighborly position led to family wars, gunfights, my property, your property, the land, especially when your neighbor there could be in many kilometer miles range from you. It wasn't like a next door wall to wall neighbor. It was your immediate neighbor was kilometer miles away from you in any way, even if your neighbor was wall in wall, room to room, apartment to apartment, or whatever, neighborly relationships were many times important, in a good sense or a bad sense, but usually in good sense, of course, because neighbors were like extended family. And they were usually fated karmic, because the place, the home, the specific came with the neighbors and surrounding people, families, culture, all of that. So, long story short, Gemini rules that which is the neighbor, that which comes with the place, the person, the situation, the travel, especially Gemini. So, those people who will coincidentally or fatedly or synchronistically or just by the default become neighbors or brothers or the other, etc., etc. So fated energy in the sign of Gemini usually brings those types of elements here. And now going back to the new moon, well, knowing of the self will be very, very important, because knowing thyself means that you can handle the other, may it be whichever element or expression from my previous example, regardless of how it play out. Knowing thyself is knowing how to relate, converse, have a communication, have a relation, have a contact, a connection with the other. You might say that these elements that I'm saying are very part of other air signs as well, like some Libra. Absolutely. one air sign is also the other air signs, right? Like air is composed of different gases, not just one, and they work in unison, nitrogen, oxygen, and all of the others. So that's how one air sign incorporates a little bit of the other as well. So like any new moon, a creational energy can get us all of the above earlier mentioned element in our lives. We create it or we think about it. Any Gemini new moon is always significant and representative of the creational power of thoughts, of the creational power of the mind, of our perceptions, of the mental sphere, of the air, really. And that creational energy, due to the airy element, many times comes into play as people, connections, thoughts that guide us on a journey, literal or symbolic, and that journey teaches us something. We become more. We become more is perfectly valid if it's in the sense that our connections, friends, people, conversations, talk enrich us. Like, for example, in the old days, going on travels, going from a tavern to tavern or any type of adventurous travel, and regardless in which sense, shape, and form, by need or for survival or optionally or from ambition or for studies or for whatever, well, really, really enriched the traveler's life in so very many ways, physically, intellectually, spiritually, in any way, shape, and form. So manifesting or creating, thinking about, using the creational force of the new moon to, as I said, make travels happen, plan travels, new adventures, new things that interest you and you would like to study. Gemini, unlike its opposite sign, Sagittarius, it is not profound, highest degree study, full mastery, which would be like higher education, university, and what comes after. Gemini is the primary study where all we need to do is have a big picture, get a grip, have a little bit of skill. We don't necessarily want to become a high class professional. We just want to be able to have a skill. Like, for example, most of us are quite happy having basic, I don't know, swimming skills or riding a bicycle. We don't even aspire for anything higher or professional. We just, even many of us don't ever use it much. But the skill, sitting on the skill still feels good. That's Gemini. The skill that you kind of need to have, or is good to have, or you wish to have. Because Gemini is also, how does my self image feel complete? Sometimes the self image for a person will only feel complete if they possess a skill or something like that. So Gemini is really, really good for learning, especially quick, efficient, improvised, self-learning, uh, getting the idea, or learning in non-official means where another person, a neighbor, a friend, someone just teaches you, or you observe them, spend time with them, converse them with them, and you just learn. Also, Gemini, this Gemini new moon is a really nice energy because the moon loves it in the sign of Gemini. The moon in Gemini is all about the lightheartedness of life, life seen through the humorous lens, taken lightly. It doesn't need to be tumultuously everything to be serious. So that is why Gemini is so very different from the fellow mercurial sign, Virgo. Both signs are ruled by Mercury, but Virgo is exactly about the serious things in life where the mind has to be used to categorize things, label things, determine the quality nature of things. Okay, judgment a little bit, but sometimes that judgment is the most important thing in life. For example, survival. Judgment, in a sense, is that animal, is that, I don't know, situation, something life-threatening, dangerous or not. That's very much discernment Virgo energy. Gemini is not that. Gemini is the light-hearted things of life. Gemini is more about, well, here is a situation. I have the option to look at the, well, of course, the seriousness of it, because it's still Mercury. It's still mercurial. It can shift very quickly. Or the positive of it, the lighthearted, the optimism, all the good that it brings, the humor, the laughter. So Gemini is also very, very good social energy, finding bridges, connection between people, diplomacy, not the Libra type, the more primal rudimentary, but it will end up, it can very well end up in the Libra type or Aquarian type. So Gemini is usually where the air energy starts off from, or the other way around, where it ends up in. And what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes the cycle is reversed, where Aquarius, the last air sign, is the good spirit, the inspiration. Spirit inspires us through this house or the expression of Aquarius. And that's when it goes into Libra. It goes the other way around. The energy, I mean, where Libra, we analyze it morally in Venusian way. And if it's all okay, if we love it, if we find another person who believes or thinks or is part of the same aspiration, politics, ideology, well, it finally ends up in Gemini, where we actually do it on an everyday basis. We integrate it in our lives. We think about it daily. We speak about it daily. We use our intelligence to promote it, support it, work on it daily, feed it actually daily. So Gemini is quite an important part of the sky for anything mental or thought or perception or social or relation, because it either is the beginning or is the final resting place, the integration place. Because when we integrate higher principles, higher thoughts, higher intellectual energy into our lower one, we upgraded our mental sphere. That's like a mental upgrade. That's where we are truly the 2.0 version of our own software, the patch. So that's how we upgrade our mind, by integrating something higher into the lower. So if the higher becomes autopilot, you can imagine that everything in life is upgraded from there and then. It's almost like when the operating system, when a truly much more improved version comes out, everything is noticeably better. You know what I mean. So it is immediately felt, immediately lived, immediately Gemini, new moon and Gemini, enjoyable. And this particular Gemini new moon is really about the joys of life. It is about options. Any planet, any energy in Gemini will also be about choices, options. What do I choose? Mercury, a mercurial element. And this particular Gemini new moon tells us that regardless of what choices we make in life and how we prioritize things in life, Mercury, right? Well, happiness of life, or the joy that something brings in our life, must be top priority, because life must also be about lightheartedness, about happiness, about joy, about appreciating the human element in it, someone else's thoughts, someone else's mind, someone else's words, someone else's speech and communication, traveling with someone else. So appreciating the other, regardless if that's a sibling, feels like a sibling, a soul sibling, or a sibling in something, or a neighbor, or anything like that. Um, so this Gemini new moon is telling us that the creational power of thoughts and of the intellect works much more efficiently if we integrate a tiny bit of joy and lightheartedness into it, the power of optimism. And this is highlighted by the fact that the uh, ruler of what optimism actually is, Jupiter, planet of hope, planet of faith, planet of optimism, seeing big, dreaming big, long distance travel, so another travel planet. Jupiter is also in the sign of the Gemini, very far from the new moon. The new moon is at the beginning of the sign, where Jupiter is at the towards the end degrees, but still its presence amplifies the expression of Gemini. It magnifies, it expands. However, the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is also in Gemini, giving extra strength to this new moon, because whatever happens in a sign, well, ultimately the ruler of that sign will dish it out. So, and we can also consider that Mercury is part of the new moon. The orb is wide, but we can consider it. So the ruler is not just present, but holds a really beautiful aspect. A beautiful aspect on one hand with Pluto in fellow air sign Aquarius. Mercury trine Pluto. Power of people, power of friendship, power of ideals, power of thoughts, power of mass thoughts, power of the community, power of news, power of information. Okay, the power of information is dual. But let's speak about the positive sides and the optimistic sides, because this lunation actually allows us to be like that. Do not necessarily want to look at the ugly, the doomy and gloomy, however we will, because of another aspect. But let's just wrap up this first of all. Um, so it by its nature, it kind of needs to be optimistic. And that's when the power of this trine with Pluto, the power of many optimistic thoughts, the power of hope, truly. In the truest sense, this Pluto and Aquarius trine this Mercury and also the new moon, both, um, is about the power of hope, the power of realistic hope, the power of hope that is based on, I don't necessarily want to say rational approach, because the moon in Gemini isn't necessarily always that rational, but things can be rational in an optimistic way for the sake of a positive outcome, for the sake to help a situation, to improve a situation, collectively especially. We can orient our thoughts to do exactly that. Give us a positive solution, a positive resolution, a positive expression. So the power of hope, the power of optimism, the power of trying to see the good side of things, or the ideal that gives everyone more strength, to especially strength to the mind, even the lower mind, to strive for the good, the greater good, the common good, the collective good, and not and not that, sorry, I'll rephrase, to overcome, to choose, to overcome the inconveniences, the hardships, the bad, the ugly, etc. So the power of choice and understanding the importance of it. Now the ruler holds even more positive aspects because it speaks in sextile with Saturn, Neptune, and Ceres conjunct together in the sign of Aries, the self. Now, Ceres, Saturn, and Neptune is a rather survival and self-focused energy, but in a positive way, because survival many times means Saturn, sovereignty, independence, needs, the integrity of the self. The self also needs to be, well, ultimately in a position of power over its own, well, self, its own, whatever that means, body, mind, initiative, power, focus, its head, Aries. So where it wants to go. It's a very, very freedom-oriented energy. And this Saturn-Neptune naturally also holds a sextile, the other arm of this triangle. Sextile, let me just point this out. This is Pluto sextiling Saturn and Neptune, and then the sextile with Mercury and the new moon. So they are in a trine. This is how the triangle forms. So this is like a minor grand trine, a very positive, powerful, empowering aspect. Sextiles work with energy. We focus on it. We feed it with energy. We feed it with something. The trine is more free-flowing because it's just given. It's provided. So this astrological configuration is really power-oriented. There are certain things that are just given, I don't know, resources, conditions, intelligence, knowledge, friends, people, community, ideal, a dream, something, and we do something big and long-lasting with it. This is a beginning energy, an initiatory energy, because both Neptune and Saturn will retrograde back into Pisces later on this year. Their retrograde starts in the summer, but they will dip back into Pisces in the autumn, October, sometimes in October. So we will still go back to the drawing board and rethink all of this, but to get an initiation, to get creative, to get hopeful, to start doing something, or to decide, make choices that, yes, I'm gonna be doing this. Yes, this is gonna be part of my life. I'm gonna become this. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna do something. It's a really, really good energy for this. Not just because of Neptune and Saturn, but also because of Ceres. Ceres is the symbol of food, of nurture, the grain, agriculture, make things grow. So we need to feed, well, Saturn, our goal, our need, and everything that we have in life, that which is given, and also Neptune, the dream, the spirit, the ideal, the love, also the love for the self, the sovereignty, our own power, Pluto. If we feed it into our goal, our dream, our thought, a relationship, a connection, an alliance, however this Gemini new moon enacts itself, it's gonna get us a very, very long way. And I also want to, before I get further, speak about the Sabian symbol of this new moon, because I find it so beautiful. An old-fashioned well. So we're looking at 7 degrees of Gemini, the Sabian symbol corresponding to that, even though the new moon takes place at 6 degrees and 5 minutes, because the Sabian symbols don't have 0. So there always a degree ahead. So when something happens at, let's take this new moon into consideration, 6 degrees 5 minutes, you will look at the 6 to 7 degrees Sabian symbol. So the 7 degree of Gemini Sabian symbol, in our case, an old-fashioned well. An old-fashioned well is so symbolic because it represents, well, water, one of the primary and most basic needs of any human being, any life, any settlement, any house, home, anything. And it also represents the way that we extract the water from below, because it is common knowledge, not just of humans, of every living nature's every part, that there is water below. And when there is water below, that means life can, especially in this sense, human life, because it's a well, a community, a family can put their foundations on their Saturn, exactly Saturn symbol in Aries. If the foundation is good, all can be good because we'll make it good. The power of work, the power of will, the power of intelligence, figuring it out. But a well is also symbolic of the trust we need to have in life. A well can, how you call that, dry out. But we need to trust in nature that the well is going to be filled due to the cycles. Trust in the cycles, trust in nature, trust in the well, because it's underground. We don't see it happening. So it's based on trust. It is and it's an old-fashioned well. So that is very, very representatives of our ancestors before, people before us, minds before us, lives before us lived this way. So it is something that our ancestors guarantee us that it's gonna work, that it's gonna support life, the well. So to me, with this new moon, it symbolizes when we're making a certain choice, when we know that what we want to choose resonates very strongly with something within us, something deep, the well, the unconscious, our most intimate and personal dreams and all that we love. It will make sense to the mind. It will make sense to the heart. It will make sense to the higher mind, to all parts of our being. And the other expression of this energy is that sometimes to find the joy of life, we don't need complicated things. We need the simplest possible things, because that's also when there is a well, even if you don't have a brick yet, you know that building next to it is going to support life. It's guaranteed. So the joy of life can come deep from within our instincts. It can be very, very basic and rudimentary, but so powerful. The willingness to embrace the joy of life, to see joy in life, regardless of what's around us, it is very, very important, and it is non-optional sometimes in life. And this is exactly another aspect that this new moon holds, is a quincunx. Black moon Lilith is two quincunxes, sorry. Black moon Lilith holds quite an exact quincunx. And there is a dwarf planet called Ixion in the sign of at 7 degrees of Capricorn, which also quincunxes the new moon. So this is a yod, a fated event. Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, of course, is about the ugly. About, we must be optimistic, joyful, dream big, fight for our ideals, fight for ultimately the self realization. Saturn in Saturn in Aries. However, not totally delusional manner. Of course, we see the ugly. Of course, we see the bad. Of course, we see everything that can threaten our dreams, threaten joy, threaten everything. But that's part of the picture. That does not mean it has to ruin and triumph over the joy of life. We need courage. Mars in Leo is very, very much about courage. And Ixion in the sign of Capricorn. Well, Ixion is symbolic of lawlessness, of rebellion, of going against the rules, the regulations, the norm. However, when in the sign of Capricorn, top-down authority, hierarchy, when that's abusive, it is our duty to go against a norm which threatens Pluto trining the new moon and Mercury, everyone's happiness and joy. So this is the yod, something that an authority or the external does, that's ugly. Black Moon Lilith triggers an awakening of some sort, triggers a strong resilience in people, trigger something ugly, something not nice to look at, something perhaps scary, or Ceres. Well, Ceres is, for example, conjunct Saturn, Neptune in the sign of Aries, famine that needs to be addressed now. Famine that is putting the lives of many, many people in danger, that is produced, let's say in that sense, by top-down authority. This will spark something big, 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 because Gemini is social media, everyone's mental sphere, right? Something that hits the news big time. It spreads like wildfire. The power of the people. Gemini is quite a rebellious energy, just like Aquarius. And Gemini is expecting Uranus later on in the summer to dip into it. So Gemini is expecting Uranus to be its, how you call that, permanent guest for the next 7 years. So that's big. That's quite a big energy. So rebellion is there. Another thing that, how should I say, really speaks to me in a way. Mercury at this moment is conjunct Pelion, which is the home of centaurs, Mount Pelion in Greece. So the sacred land of centaurs, centaur energy in any way, shape, and form, well, is volatile. It is always about something higher, something bigger than the individual, it's like Sagittarius, a highest ideal, a goal, something we need to accomplish, something that we stand up for, something that we sacrifice for, something that we're aiming for. So the Sagittarian energy is very, very there. Speaking about Sagittarius, at the time of this new moon, Jupiter being in Gemini, so influencing the new moon, opposes dwarf planet Huya, indigenous Colombian rain god. Rain god, Huya in Sagittarius, so travels at sea, storms at sea, things that go on sea, because Sagittarius is also transport and the law. So division of voters, which part belongs to which country. And we saw a lot of, well, discussions back and forth and threats all over the world stage. This ocean, this sea, that sea. People are fighting over territories at sea. So Jupiter, planet of law, standing across Huya, will magnify that, amplify that, but also something happens at sea that will spark great controversy. At the same time, the same Huya holds a trine with Chiron conjunct Eris, dwarf planet Eris in the sign of Aries. That's a trine. Whatever happens at water, it produces healing or the need to heal, or something at seas opens the path of healing. Because Huya is also representative of, well, rain. Rain is also what feeds the collective unconscious, something that needs to give relief and peace to the people suffering collectively. But another energy here that I find pretty interesting, and it speaks about water and seas, is that the new moon holds a tight square with dwarf planet Gongkun at 6 degrees of the sign of Pisces. Gongkun is the Chinese god of flooding, a not very cheerful fellow. Floods, water, seas. So there is a mixture of good and bad. Mercury is conjunct at the time of this full moon a fixed star named Murfak, something like that, which symbolizes masses of people affected simultaneously by some kind of major meteorological phenomenon. Rain, flood, water, or the lack of it, or issues around. I know that, for example, Pakistan and India have a big problem around water because India is stopping the flow of water into Pakistan, but that's just one small example. Something happens with water or seas, or, well, at this moment Uranus is also very active. So it can be like a tsunami, a seaquake, or Huya. In Sagittarius, meteor shower. Something comes from space. Because Sagittarius is the stars and beyond the astral plane. And another element that I forgot to mention earlier when I spoke about Black Moon Lilith quincunxing the new moon, it's not just Black Moon Lilith alone, Black Moon Lilith with asteroid Vesta, goddess of the sacred flame. So it's also about protection, feeling safe, home, families affected. So it's quite a powerful energy. And what else would I like to mention here? Jupiter, at the moment of the new moon, is also squaring the North Node in the sign of Pisces. So that is also important because, exactly as I said earlier, another layer to the energy of the choices. Choices that we make and we dream up, we speak about, or we make it real through something virtual. Need to be rooted in wisdom, in self-knowledge. North Node in Pisces, the big dream has to be aligned with, well, morality, love, ancient and modern wisdom. Wisdom of your ancestors, I would like to replace ancient wisdom with that. Because it's not the typical, okay, it's also about ancient wisdom, but in the sense that I can tell you very easily how that energy is already playing out. Let's leave the dogmatism of the old religiously and in any way, shape, and form. Institutionally, religiously, ideologically, let's leave outdated rituals and dogmatism and really outdated principles. Let's leave them out from our collective lives already in any way, shape, and form. That's the square between North Node and Jupiter. And also, law. If a court, if international law, if the legislators are just symbolic, Pisces, no one needs symbolism. No one needs a chocolate teapot because it melts. It's useless. No one needs useless laws, powerless laws, and legislators. So either the law steps up or it's a lie. We must decide which one, and we will. Because Gemini new moon and Mercury. But quite personally, the new that all of us are starting to initiate one way or another. Some people are already on track. Their initiations already took place, maybe last year, maybe early this year, maybe right now. For others, it's still pending, but it's something imminent because the need is imminent. The Aries energy and this triple conjunction of Venus, Chiron, and Eris. Venus and Aries, what I need, I need. It's not questionable, not negotiable, especially if it's something for survival. The Vel. Remember the old-fashioned Vel, the Sabian symbol of Gemini new moon. Needs are not negotiable and not subject to compromise. Needs are sacred and they are needs. So how do we go about fulfilling them? This Jupiter squaring the North Node says it needs to be realistic, but realism doesn't mean hidden or indirect pessimism. Just because the picture is not optimistic now, it's not realism if we align ourselves to the external, if it goes against our needs. It is our duty to elevate. It is our duty not to turn a blind, as I said, this is not about turning a blind eye to the ugly. This is combating, turning the balance, the scales, the tides to a bit higher, as in a bit of optimism, faith, Jupiter. When it doesn't make sense, then faith is all the sense we need. And faith isn't something just Piscean. That's exactly why Jupiter is in a place of the sky where it doesn't really like it, Gemini. Because it's way too realistic. It cannot come with BS. But when faith has a certain power that it can create, then it's no longer BS. Then it's exactly the creational force of elevated thoughts. So that is exactly the expression of this new moon. All of us need to create our reality. All of us need to Chiron conjunct Eris, trine Huya, channel, summon, somehow invoke into reality the power of faith, the power of our soul needs, our soul aspirations that are maybe not specific, are big, complex elements. For example, peace. Peace, the ideal of it is simple because everyone knows what it means. living it, executing it is more complex. However, before we can live it, execute it, especially in a period when there isn't peace in abundance, and peace is very, very scarce, both individually, personally in our hearts, for any reason, and externally alike, then we need to invite it back into the who we are in the sign of Sagittarius. It's somewhere in the ether, in the astral, in the heart, in the mind of the creator. Because Sagittarius is the host of the galactic center, the very source of all existence. The black hole at the middle of the Milky Way, which keeps all of the cosmos in right balance. So that's why it is associated with the creative expression of the divine, God's mind, basically. We need to invoke peace, joy, unity, love, solidarity. All of us are one back into our hearts, back into our reality, back into our faith, basically. We need to believe in it, not just as a logical factor, as belief like that. We need to give our faith and our belief creational power. And this is also what this Gemini new moon, in this not so very easy time, asks us to do. So everyone must use this power to bring, create, invoke through one way or another some kind of joy in their lives. And as a closure, I would like to say that, well, this Gemini new moon can have so very many practical sides, really good for new projects, communication, jobs, interviews, prospecting something, informing yourself about something, collecting information, learning, either through self-learning or like officially going to, like, I don't even know, institutions or firms or companies or whatever can provide the information, the teaching that one needs. It's a really good time to really get out there and collect information, see what we can do. Of course, a part of that information is going to be that, well, things are very, very uncertain, unstable at the moment. So not everything is so reliable that we would maybe a few years ago would have definitely needed for reliability. Maybe in this period, we need to make a lot of compromises. We need to accept the bare minimum, but the rest is faith. The rest is where we can compensate by believing in ourselves, by believing in our work, believing in our intelligence, not just the mercurial one, but also our higher intelligence that will just figure it out, and believing in life, our life, believing that we'll just figure it out. And the past years, especially 2020, the pandemic and all the horrors, especially the wars and the terrorism and all that happened afterward, should really not discourage us and not send us into paranoia. We must trust life. We must. We must trust the force coursing through our veins. That force which gives us this chance to be conscious, to be sentient. We're not generating that. Something breeds that into us. We need to trust that. And it's not a coincidence. So, long story short, we really, really need to start trusting the self and trusting the self's relation with life. And really, mind over matter, ultimately, this Gemini new moon. Make sure that our minds are like a sponge absorbing optimism, joy, belief in joy, desire to experience joy, trust in one another, and put that into the mixture, put that into the equation, and then the matter that our mind is going to create will have to reflect that. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, bye for now.